That's right, episode 2. With all that, like that tsunami of information coming at us, and a lot of it is good, and a lot of it is important for business outcomes. But figuring it out, to your point about if we pull on lever A but C doesn't change, what do we do now? What are the KPIs that you establish? What factors do you consider? How do you ensure that they align? Like that's the big. It seems to me that's almost the big lift, which is you want this outcome. You've been trying A, B, and C. We got to look at D through Z now. Like, what are your KPIs?
Well, there's an old adage, I think it's called SMART, make it specific, make it measurable, achievable or attainable, and then relevant and time bound. And those still hold true. I mean, there's just some things, like go look. It's just such a, and I'm a practical person, I really try to, no matter how much data I get, sometimes you just have to go and figure things out and go look for yourself with your own two eyes. And I think, using that SMART approach is always a good way to go to start, but it's an ongoing process. And that's the thing, is that you never, when you think about, continuous improvement or process improvement, you're always trying to get better. And that's the one thing, I've learned in all three of my stops. And that's a common thread that, in my consultancy, is that, we're all just trying to get a little better every day. There's no such thing. I had this old, he was a great history professor, and I remember Dr. May, and he said to me, and he's long gone, but he was a jewel of a man. But he would say to me, it's like, there's no such thing as perfection, but there's no reason why you can't chase it. And that's really what we're trying to do but you got to have enough humility to be able to say, guess what, guys and gals, we picked the wrong thing. We're chasing the wrong thing because it's not moving. Because if you all are doing everything you say you're going to do, and you're doing it every day, and I'm measuring it, it's smart, it's specific, it's measurable, and nothing's changing, then we picked the wrong element, and we've got to change. Because if you just sit back on your laurels, then you have, new companies coming through that will learn from your mistakes, because that's our dynamic. And it's not like it used to be, I guess. My wife is always like, don't age yourself. You're not old. So I always kind of, put that in the back of my mind. But, everything's out there, I mean, not even like it, things you don't intend to go out there, but like this right now, this interview, this podcast, right, is sharing information and sharing the things that I've learned in 30 plus years of transportation, and all the mistakes I've made, but I've learned from them. And so they're all incredible opportunities. And so, competition now is fierce. And if you just kind of think you've got it all figured out, someone else is going to figure it out a little better than you. And you're going to be playing catch up.
Yeah. Within that macro environment, obviously, some of the examples, when you put those KPIs in place, we use those SMART goals, where have been key takeaways, and what have been key takeaways of some of the successes?
Oh, well, trailer utilization, for UPS, it used to be pieces per trailer. And that was just an average. You would take the average container back then, when I say container, it's a trailer or a container, that goes on a rail car. But there were probably 20 or 25 different sizes, 48 footer, 52, 53 footer, 28, 26 drop trailers. So there's all these different configurations, but we just categorize them in long, short, long and pup, we used to call them. And so then you're just, but then it never, so there were two things wrong with that initial element. Was one, it didn't take into the specific dimensions of the container.
Sure.
And two, it didn't account for the size of the package. Packages have gotten bigger. When I started UPS, nobody would ever, in their wildest dreams, think to ship like a small futon or a couch through UPS, but now it's commonplace. So packages have gotten bigger, they've gotten bulkier, they've gotten heavier, and you have to take those two things into account. So we went from pieces per trailer that was long established to trailer utilization, which took into account the size of the container and the size of the boxes, the specific boxes going into that specific that container. So that was one. That's one
Sure.
example of how we transitioned away from an old measurement. Another one would be, one of the things that's great with Samsara is using their safety scorecard. So you're getting this telematics stuff, right?
Yeah.
You're getting hard braking, hard turning. If they're rolling through stop signs because the cameras can identify the octagon. All this telematics stuff that you would never have 10, 15 years ago, and certainly not at the price point that you can get them at now.
Right.
And so when we put in a safety scorecard, we had drivers literally who were like, oh, we had the scorecard, and they would come in like, I'm number one. And we gamified it, and we had so much fun. I would like tease guys, they would come across a scale, and I would get on the microphone that we used, phone, we would communicate them. I'm like, man, you're like fifth today. What's going on? And he's like, there's no way. And so we had a lot of fun with it. It was definitely a culture change because we made it fun, and it wasn't just about us hammering people over the head saying, drive safe, drive safe, drive safe. It was really an opportunity to have fun with that. And then, the bid optimizations for Park West galleries. I mean, when we took all the rates that they were currently paying and, bumped it against other carriers that have rates, we showed them that, there was room for a lot of savings, more than 25% savings. So significant savings, because, usually, the bid process is an interesting process, because if you believe in competition, which I do, it makes you better, it makes you sharpen the pencil.
Sure.
And, so putting things out to bid frequently is really a good thing. And I think, but it's not easy work. You have to get all that information. You have to organize it. You have to do comparisons. And a lot of companies, don't either don't have the expertise or don't have the bandwidth to do those things. And that's why at Zero Down, we're so successful at the things we do.
It's a great array of answers, a great way of seeing how things significantly improved. And it also alludes to like eras of things changing, the ability to change to match up with things. And obviously technology is one of the massive changes over the arc of your career. And software is now no longer like just accounting back of the office sort of software. It's everywhere in every way. How do transportation companies handle their software? What are you seeing?
Yeah. And again, I don't think it's transportation companies. I think it's I think it's companies in general, but specifically for this conversation, if you have a fleet, there's bakeries and steel companies that all have fleets, all kinds of markets that have taken their logistics internally and, are trying to manage it through. But it's, poorly. It's fragmented. I mean, obviously there's some companies that are exceptional at it. I'm not trying to paint a broad brush, but, there's, I think, and especially for a company like Wisdom, who's good in that kind of middleware type of realm, there's opportunity because, like I said before, they might have bought a Samsara, they might have bought an ERP system, they might have bought, a Salesforce or HubSpot, and bringing those things and bringing it together and linking them and implementing and leveraging those things is really valuable. It's when I was at United Scrap Metal, one of the first things we did was kind of take we had an ERP that's specific to the metal recycling industry, and we took that and put an instance up in the cloud of Azure and put Power BI reporting over it, and having the ability to get that instantaneous information in a much better format than the ERP was doing was really powerful, because I can then tie it to the sales, which was in Salesforce at the time, their volumes and the revenue, and say, okay, and start to get trends on how much incoming metal was coming in. I remember I was working with a guy, Joe, at United Scrap Metal, and he asked me, he's like, why are you helping me trying to figure out how much volume's coming in? And I said, Joe, if I know how much volume is coming in, that, by the way, are picked up by my drivers, if I know how much volume is, I know how many drivers to dispatch, but then I also know on the outbound, because we would bring in metal, then, either refine it, break it down, chop it up and make it usable to sell to,
Right.
to metal producers to melt down and create new metal. And I said, so now I have how many drivers I need to dispatch. I could start getting an idea how effective they are at doing it. And then on the outbound, I know how much freight I got to move, how many over the road carriers I got. And they shipped all modes. So it was barge, rail and over the road, but all of them needed trucks to move to get them to either the railhead there was the trucks left on their own, but they all involved trucks because the rail, I had to truck it to a rail yard, and to the barge, I had to trip it down to the loading docks.
Yep.
So there were always trucks. So having the ability to plan that capacity and what I needed was really what changed it. But that was an example of how integrating those systems really can help.
Well, it's interesting to hear that, to be like, in hindsight, it's obvious you need to optimize your loads. Like, why wouldn't you want to do that as an organization? And he's like, why are you doing this? You're like, to achieve the thing we want to achieve, the success thing.
Right.
Why don't we optimize what we're doing? With that,
he was a fantastic. The guy knew how to chop. I mean, he knew all the different types of metal and coppers and different. It's kind of like chemistry, right? Because
totally.
A certain type of copper has, it's copper, but like metal, stainless steel has some nickel in it, some regular metal, and so obviously I didn't study much on that part of the business, but he was knowledgeable. But so his job wasn't to move it. That was my job, right? But I needed him to understand why, so that he could support me, because that's the other thing that is a big piece, I think, that missing is sometimes, is because you have different stakeholders involved in some of these projects, and it might be the CFO saying, I need this, or the CEO says, I need that. That's fine. And those decisions could be made at a high level, but you need the people that actually do the work to really buy into those opportunities and those exercises things that you're trying to do.
Well, I literally wanted to get into the next part, which is like getting all the business unit stakeholders aligned is like, obviously, integrating anything new, whether it be an email system, a production system, a software system. That is, man, just donuts at scale is so hard to do at the unit leader category.
Yeah, they like nicer things,
so you got to really cater. Really, your budget goes.
Yeah.
Besides better catering, what strategies would you recommend to get those business unit leaders on board?
Well, it really is about alignment. It's about communication. And I guess that's where the salesman in me comes out, right? Mm-hmm. Is, what's in it for me, right? And you have to, but I think where leaders sometimes fall short is that they only engage, maybe one level down, right? Mm-hmm. And okay, so I'm the, COO, and so my VP of operations, directly works with me all the time, thinks that's a great idea. You're a genius. And, and then, you're, it's ridiculous. So you probably should go ask some other people what their opinions are. But then you gotta get it down all the way to the frontline worker, because if any piece of that chain is broken, it's just not going to happen. So like my example with the, bringing on the samsara for the drivers. If I did not meet with those drivers and go to those driver meetings and tell them this is why we're doing it, and I had a great team there, managers and dispatchers who were all fantastic human beings who were bought into it, it wouldn't happen. And you have to, but it takes some work too, because for operators, there's always this classic dilemma, right? It's like the three classic, conflicts: man against himself, man against nature, and man against man. Mm-hmm. There's some more. There's operations versus sales. Operations, sales doesn't do anything. And then, the salespeople, the operators are just, Neanderthals. They can't comprehend these so, and IE versus operations, and, finance versus everybody else, so there's always these.
Nobody knows what marketing is doing. Nobody knows.
Exactly. Yeah. They're golfing a lot. That.
Being against, because you don't understand. Yeah.
Right. Don't even get me started on digital marketing, because that thing is crazy now. But so getting those stakeholders all in line and taking it down to the lowest level and really making them, helping them understand what is the big picture, but most importantly, how it's going to help them.
Yeah.
So, the finance. So for Samsara, right? For the CFO, I can have better tabs on my drivers. Bring down my pay less overtime. That's right down to that's reducing expense. My compliance guy, safety. The owner of the company, safety, liability, more effectiveness. So by taking the time to explain those things and really get as granular and tell that story as best you can, and even down to the driver, having a system, knowing, because listen, when we talk about drivers, the number one thing we kind of forget about it, right, is that their truck is like their office for 8-9 hours a day, right? Sometimes 10. And they want it to run. They don't want it to break down. They want it to be clean. They want it, so those are things that, from a driver's perspective, it's like, listen, because if you don't get the driver's truck ready, then he has to borrow somebody else's truck. And that is a place nobody wants to be. Or there's always that one forgotten truck that nobody wants, or the smoking truck, right? That the one guy who still smokes, Camels smokes in every day. So nobody wants that guy's truck, right? So, the sell to them was like, listen, I'm going to keep your truck running. I'm going to get telematics data that tells me that your truck is running a little too hot. It's telling me that, it's pulling to the left. It's telling me that the brakes, all my scheduled maintenance is already in there. So we're going to do it ahead of time because no driver wants to sit at the end, sit at the edge of a road and wait for a tow, sitting there, on your phone all day.
Yeah.
So that was the way we actually took it down to the frontline worker.
And within that, you've mentioned Samsara. What are the elements of that? How does that affect performance? You've mentioned how to sort of pitch it to each of these stakeholders. Mm-hmm. How does it affect then the performance in either direction?
Yeah. So general category, Internet of Things, right? So you look at the different aspects within Samsara. EDL, which is, driver logs, making sure that the drivers are, not working past their allotted hours from DOT regulations. Because remember, if you're a professional driver, your driver's license is your lifeline.
Right.
If you lose your license, speeding, people think that, these drivers speeding, they're taking big chances. When you see an over-the-road guy or any professional driver speeding, going through a red light, they are taking big risks because they could lose their license. The threshold is a lot lower for them to lose their license than you and me driving on the road as civilians. And so that's a big component. Telematics, having all the sensors, that already are in the truck, but being able to capture it through the, I think it's called the OTC or the port that's in the truck to be able to see what all is going on in these vehicles. Really starts to, because you want trucks running, you want the wheels turning, because if you got an asset that's sitting, you got 2 or 3 trucks down, now you've got to scramble, you got to redispatch your drivers. There's costs allocated to that. And that's one of the benefits. And going back to the previous point, that's really where I've been lucky, or not lucky because I worked hard at it, but that's been an area of focus, is that to be able to identify those costs, it really brings up, makes it hit home. Because if I could explain to a stakeholder, a leader, to say, okay, well, no big deal. The 8 trucks are down. Okay, well, there's 8 trucks that are displacing, 6 drivers, and now we got to juggle, right? So now you're putting more wear and tear on the other 6 trucks because you got those 8 trucks down. By the way, you're paying X per month because they're leased or they're purchased vehicles that you might have financed.
Yep.
And then you got unhappy drivers. Then you got missed customers, because you also have mixed customers, because now maybe driver 1 comes in late and doesn't make it, and driver 2 is sitting around waiting to use his truck on a different shift because he doesn't have his truck or her truck. Mm-hmm. And now you're paying maybe, overtime because he's going to leave late. So there's all these things, and be able to quantify it and say, okay, so that truck being down cost me, an extra $722 a day in operating costs. When all of a sudden, when you hear that, and then we're like, well, how long has it been down? All right, so it's been 20 days. So now you're talking, whoa, that's some real money. It's almost $14,000, right? So now it starts to add up. So what happens is that thing's done for 2 months, 3 months, right? So it starts to add up. So those are the things that I was lucky to be able to learn quickly from the time I spent in finance and how to tell a story with numbers and cost.
Yeah, people, processes, and communication. Absolutely. And being able to take the data and convert it into a story that other people understand is really one of the things that Wisdom does it. That's one of the things that people that need to understand this space have to be able to do, because it doesn't work the other way. Otherwise, it's just an island. With that in mind, so, I mean, AI has a billion different iterations at this point. People say AI mean chatbots. They say AI mean LLMs. They say AI and mean radiology automation. It's a huge field, but IoT has been around for a bit, and you mentioned it several times, and it's really an underlying dynamic amount of data as well. Like, it's just like producing just petabytes from everywhere. In the industries you're in the space you're in, how are those two big topics affecting things, and how do you see it over the next 3 to 5 years? Let's say.
Oh gosh, it was interesting. I was at DePaul University, my alma mater, a couple of years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. And I was sitting on, they do a summit, a supply chain summit or logistics summit. I forgot. It's a couple of times a year. I should remember the name. But shout out to the Blue Demons. But it was interesting because there was all these graduate students and they were very nervous. You could tell, you could feel the whole thing. This was, AI was starting. I think it was kind of ChatGPT-ish that time. It really kind of blew up. And there was this palpable sense of distress because they're like, oh my God, I'm going to finish graduate school and I'm not going to have a job. And so when I was at United Scrap Metal, we had a customer, LK, who all of a sudden was clearing out. So they make stainless steel sinks and, things like that. So a ton of stainless steel. And they called me up. So my salespeople called me up on a Thursday before Good Friday. And, so it's like, this is kind of odd. Yeah. They say, they're like, hey, Ray, how you doing? Like,
best of moods.
Best of moods. I'm getting, softening me up. And they're like, we won this awesome opportunity. And I said, okay, great. What is it? So it was LK, and it was, 150 loads. So 52-foot trailers from 3 locations. Somewhere in Ohio, forget, Olive Branch, Mississippi, and Las Vegas, Nevada. And okay, great, sounds good. And they're like, can you start tomorrow picking them up? And I said, ladies, it is the Thursday before Good Friday. Do you think I'm going to get a hold of anybody to start moving 150 loads? And so I said, at least give me till Monday. So got on the phone, had a relationship with people at Schneider, and I told them my situation because I had a great relationship with them, as I did with JB Hunt, another fantastic organization. But got on the phone with the Schneider folk. All of a sudden, they just activated. They got all through, they had their intermodal division, they had their over the road division. So all divisions were like, we're calling you tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. You got it, right?
Wow. By
Monday morning, we had tractor trailers waiting at every single location, and we moved over 150 loads in 3 days. And listen, I'll tell you this right now, and I'll probably eat these words in about 10 years. It's going to take that long, but AI is never going to take that job. No. Transportation and logistics is still a relationship-based kind of industry, and the people that you meet, and that's why I'm so excited about my role at Zero Down, and then also the board working with Wisdom, is that if you build strong relationships, no machine is ever going to take that away from us. AI is a great tool. It's fantastic. Yep. I use it every day. My team uses it every day in ways that I can't even, I'm blown away on how creative my team at Zero Down is. And the people at Wisdom are fantastic. But there is no substitute for relationships, because without that relationship, if I got on a website, I don't care if I had a bot. Well, that's a good idea, actually. I'm not going to throw that out there because now I've got an idea. But if if I try to get on a website and say, hey, by the way, I need to pick up 150 loads starting Monday,
Yeah.
there wouldn't be, I would not get a response they would just be like, that wacko, right? It would be completely dismissed.
Does not compute. That's
does not compute. Exactly.
Yeah. It's a great reminder on that. And within that, the human element is still the human element, and it is still essential. And if we're going to keep building and being around, we should continue to do human things. That's really really important. With that in mind, these tools are tremendous tools. And digital transformation, we've talked about for a decade or so now. It seems like we're just always digitally transforming.
Paperless. Remember, 20 years ago, paperless.
Yeah, it's all touchscreen and paperless, which now, of course, we're seeing in transportation in cars, being maybe everything on a touchscreen is not exactly safe for the human part of it. What other barriers have you seen to transformation, to the initiatives, trying to get some of the older school, sort of the humans involved, but also just the organizations that have legacy systems that just don't want to change the legacy system? What are the barriers?
Well, some of the obvious barriers are cost, right? It's not cheap to transform or to move to migrate to another system. There's always that. Two is that there's comfort in doing things the way you've done them for years, and a lot of people hang their head on them. And I think that's the human element of being resistant to change. Fear is a big part of that. It's a big motivator, right? You talk to some psychologists and they say the only two real motivators are fear and joy and pleasure. So there's not much pleasure in transportation, I'll tell you that. But there's a lot of fear. And but also, lack of data. You got to everybody talks about data and get your data, but that's just the beginning. It's just capturing it. Then you got organizing and make sure it's right, validating, and then normalizing it, because you have different systems that are going to have simple things like date formats. You might have one column that's in a date format and then another one that's in text format, and how do you combine those things? So those are things that are just. But when you get the right team, like WeSum or Zero Down, and I know I'm kind of being the ad spokesperson here, but when you get a great team behind you and they understand those challenges and more importantly have experience to do it,
right?
You can overcome those things, pretty easily. But I think one of them is, fear is a big one, resistant to change, and then some companies, just don't have that expertise in house, and that's where our organizations come in.
With that in mind, since I like the way we've been structuring this, been a little bit of philosophy, a little bit of theory, a little bit of practical. What's the practical cases? What do you have? What are your examples around that?
Practical case how?
Oh, in terms of practical case in which your digital transformation has created positive impact, has transformed an org.
Yeah. Well, trailer utilization was obviously one of them. That was a big transformation because we married billing data with tracking information. That was a big one. But I'm really excited about, because the LTL market's new to me. I was, a carrier, right? Small package carrier. And then in United Scrap Metal, I was a full truckload shipper. So that was a different end of the boat. But LTL is really unique because it really is a fragmented type of company, industry that's just, all kinds of, different data sources coming from different, some carriers, I think I heard a stat that there's over, 2 million, don't quote me on this, but I'm a generalist. So I should have put that as a disclaimer. I'm a generalist. I'll give you directionally accurate numbers. Unless I'm trying to sell you on something, then I get pretty specific.
Sure.
But, that there's almost 2 million carriers in the United States. And if you're, I think that if you're have a fleet over 1,000, you're like 700. So that means there's a lot of onesies and twosies out there, a lot of mom and pops who do a fantastic job. So in the LTL market, be able to bring that information together and make it not only, reasonable, measurable, but actionable, where we can go to our customers and say, hey, listen, we can optimize your network and do it this way. We even have services like, freight claims, which we can help on manage that whole process. We also can, if a vendor or a client is looking for where's the optimal place for me to put my warehouse? We can help with that. So there's a lot of opportunity in the LTL market.
And then within the industry as a whole, this digital transformation, how do you see that role, especially now, sort of, and obviously Zero Down and Wisdom? Yes, I mean, if you're successful at it, you can talk about it without it being a sales pitch. So I guess my question there underlying it is like, how do you see that role of digital transformation at this particular point going forward?
Well, I see it as challenging. I think the companies that embrace change and embrace technology I think AI is definitely going to be the revolution that everybody's planning it to be. So the organizations that first embrace it, because really, if you look, you read the news or listen to the news, it's all about use cases, right?
Yeah.
And how do you find those use cases that really can help my organization through AI, move faster? And it's going to make you move faster, but you got to figure out how to use it. And I think those are the organizations that are going to be successful.
What are your last thoughts around organizations looking to strategize really well in this moment around those topics, AI, IoT, and data?
My wife works for a company called Logicalis, and they're, kind of a thought leader. They're in the tech world. And they have a great practice, and we're adopting it at Zero Down, and really is coming up with a AI committee, which ultimately lends itself back to getting the front line, the people who actually do the work. I mean, it's nice when you have a title and you could say, you have this title or that title, but sometimes we forget, what it takes every day to come to work and do these things every day at a high level. And so, looking at it from Logicalis, they developed this great AI committee that, she's kind of coaching me on a little bit and give me, I get to hear little bits here and there, but we're adopting it. And so what we're doing is taking people, who are a little bit more creative, maybe some entrepreneurial spirit, and bringing those people together out of each department and bringing them together and saying, okay, well, what do you think? First of all, educating them, because not everybody knows what AI can do, right? Find out how they're using it. How do they want to use it? Where do they think they could use it? And then really put your arms around it, because you do have to put guardrails around it because you don't want your data out there and there's some things you have to worry about. But really embracing that. It's almost like a grassroots approach, which I love, because you're getting people who know what it's like and have to deal with the problems every day. Just like we do at Zero Down, where, there's companies that, have entire departments that are just taking these paper invoices and checking their tariffs manually and checking them off and then paying the bill, and the companies that can really get their arms around it, don't be afraid of it, and really embrace it, but really get everybody involved and involved at a high level are going to be the ones who are going to rise to the top.
All right. Well, those are great thoughts on that. Ray, I want to thank you so much for joining us here on the Briefing Hub. For folks who maybe need a consultation from Zero Down or the board member of Wisdom, what's the strategy? How do they reach out? Do they have to
reach out? Find me on LinkedIn or use my email.
And this podcast. What are we going to hold them to?
Pardon me?
No, I said, do we have to subscribe to this podcast? What do we have to hold them to?
You have to sign up for the podcast. Yes.
Oh, that's great. Well, Ray, I can't thank you enough. It's been really insightful. It's been a great conversation. These are all hot topics. Hopefully, we can catch up again. And, the pace of change won't be that in 3 months we have to completely rewrite this whole thing.
Well, it's funny. I was at with a company called TD Cynics. I was at one of their leadership meetings with my wife, and it was amazing. And I forgot the young man's name, but he went up there and spoke, and he said, and he was a pretty high powered young man. I mean, just public speaker, did a phenomenal job. I can't remember his name, but he said that he has to check his phone for Twitter because something could drastically change. And it's so true. The pace of change is just unheard of, but what do you got? That's what we got. That's what we got to work with.
It's got to, I'll take this over the 1300s as pace.
Yes, 100%. We got hot water,
Exactly. Lots of great things. There's one of the things about data and change. I know we got to go. You got to go. But
I don't have to go, man. This is great. I like this.
The craziest thing, and we've said it every year for years now, and it's true. the pace of innovation is currently the slowest that it is going to be in the foreseeable future. And that to me is just, I'm too old, Ray. I'm too old.
Well, I would say that, but my wife would probably get mad at me, so I got to hear first.
All right. Well, everybody, that's Rey Marin. This has been the Briefing Hub. Thanks for being with us. We look forward to seeing you on the next.
Jeremy, thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.